This is a very good point. Last Saturday we discussed. I want to repeat again about what's the big differences among European colonization and Japanese one, especially before World War II. 400 years Japanese take Korea and Taiwan and invaded in Manchuria and get into the Southeast Asia, waging war.
Right.
But basically, the big differences, big gaps among Westerners' colonialization and Japanese one. How do you think?
Right. So, yeah, we talked about this, and but actually, the focus of the discussion was mainly what happened afterwards. So, if we look at Africa at the moment, we can still, and actually a lot of countries in the world, we can still see clearly the history of colonialization in Africa and in the Middle East, especially, where Western multinationals, Western countries, still maintain a very big influence today. Geopolitics and play a role here. What we see is that in many cases that the former colonializer has forged certain ties with minority groups in these developing countries, and by giving certain privileges to minorities, they would be certain that they would get support of them because they're a minority. They need the help of the Western country. So an example is Pahlavi of Iran, who basically owed his position, who owed his position as a king.
What is you said minority? What is this?
Basically, the principles of divide and rule were widely applied when it came to colonialism. So, for example, in Indonesia, the Netherlands worked together with the soldiers of Molokai.
Oh, I see.
They were a minority, and they had their own agenda in Indonesia. They actually aimed for independence. And so they thought that the Dutch, even though they were not necessarily very fond of being ruled by the Dutch, but they saw this as a ticket, as an opportunity to actually become independent. So as long as they would fight with the Dutch, they would get a status of independence. Or in the case of Pahlavi, who collaborated with the British, he would maintain his position in exchange for basically squandering their mineral wealth and giving up all the oil reserves to British Petroleum. So there was this is Nigeria. We have Shell, and we have other examples where colonializers managed to forge strong economic ties based on let's say undemocratic support for minority rulers. In exchange for economic ties. Now, we don't see this in when we look at the colonialization of Japan. Japan did not forge any minority rulers to stand up. In fact, when we look at Indonesia, when we look at Malaysia, we look at a lot of other countries. Basically, the invasion of Japan started a process of democratization. I don't know if that was by design or whether that was a logical consequence because the influence of Japan disappeared after World War II because Japan lost. That's a big difference. Japan lost World War II. England, United States won. So they were more in a position to maintain their relationships. And we don't know exactly what would have happened if Japan would have stayed longer. But as it happened, Japan actually did not forge any long-lasting ties with any of their colonies in Asia. So that could actually indicate that Japan would actually set out to create democracy in these countries. That's one way of looking at it. Another way is looking at, okay, because Japan lost the war. It's the same with Germany. Germany doesn't have any ties, doesn't have any strong ties with former colonies. Also because basically by the time they after they lost the war, they completely retreated from Africa, for example.
Yeah, I think a little bit strange feeling for the countries which Japanese military governed before World War II. For example, Darien is their population is 6 million, but 5% of Darien people can speak Japanese and very favorable for Japan. And
Right.
this is one big territory of Manchuria before. Only that city is very much favorable for us. And the other issue is Southeast Asia and Malay and Singapore and Indonesia, Philippines is those countries are favorable for us. It's very curious. Japanese never any support or making an establishment in those areas after World War II,
Right.
because this is a big reason is before World War II. So they did something, but we didn't study or we discarded history. So we Japanese people they don't know, and I think something behind. We had a fact. An exception is Korea. Korea hates Japan. Taiwan favor for us. Korea is, I studied, we have a reason. Actually, Japanese government invaded Korea, Chosen Peninsula, 1910, and they took their land from farmers, and many people pushed them get into poverty. So that is a big reason they have some bad feeling for us. But
Right.
any other issue is, of course, we invaded China and vast territory of China, but this kind of history, Chinese people and also Japanese people, we forget it, except that end. So this is my feeling.
Right.
So I think also maybe you don't study about those areas, me neither. So I think, but Japanese people, is big differences compared with European colonialism. Is Japanese people, they don't have feeling kind of invasion except China. Okay, China is
Right.
actually waged the war, but also okay, battle happened, but every country in South Asia just only the few months. Okay, so almost all time they occupy those countries, just occupy, manage that country.